Welcome, everybody. Love to see this great group today. We have a lot of great stuff to talk about, so we're not going to delay too long. Okay, everybody checking in. Beautiful. Okay, well, welcome again, everyone, to our Policy for the People session. Today, we are talking about the Farm Bill. These are monthly sessions, and they're really some of the best things you can do to raise your voice and lend your experiences to making the changes that you want to see. This is meant to be an interactive session, so we're going to have a formal Q&A at the end, but we would love it if you would drop your questions in the chat as we go along, and that way we can help keep track of what you're all wondering about and what you want to know more about. I'm Allison Montagnan. I am the engagement manager for the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. I use she, her pronouns. And our check-in for the chat today, if you'll humor us, is what is your favorite fall food? It can be something grown or something made, but it's always nice to think about food here at lunchtime. So that's what we're all doing, I'm sure. I'm going to take care of a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to introduce you to our amazing speaker for the day. But this is a really important tone setter. So the Rhode Island Food Policy Council's mission is building a more equitable, accessible, economically vibrant, and environmentally sustainable food system in Rhode Island. And we are also an independent nonprofit organization, so we're not affiliated with the state or any political bodies, and this allows us to really be nimble in our policy work. And then also, I really want to acknowledge that the work of the council itself are volunteers. They're amazing individuals from across the state who represent all different sectors and life experiences. And the work that we do is really powered by them. If you are interested in joining us, please reach out to me directly. I'll drop my email in the chat later, or go to our website and find the Join the Council page. These are the three core issue areas that our mission focuses on. The food system is multifaceted, of course, but we've sort of dialed them into these three sections. So that would be food access and nutrition security, food business and economic development, and food, climate, and environment. The Rhode Island Food Policy Council is also committed to equity, and to achieve our mission and to support these core values, we recognize the ongoing need to restate this. It's something by the council members, for the council members, and we really live these values. And it's that RIFPC recognizes the fact that many negative impacts of Rhode Island's current food system are grounded in a history of colonialism, genocide of indigenous people, slavery, private ownership of land, and the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of too few. We also recognize that people with visible and non-apparent disabilities are among the most marginalized groups in our country. RIFPC believes that when power shifts to be shared more equitably across our communities and our state, we transform our future together for generations to come. So just really want everyone to keep that in mind today as we're listening and learning. And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen here. Was I not sharing my screen?
You're still sharing.
It's not letting me end it. Sorry, guys. Give me a sec.
Okay.
I've never had such a technical difficulty before.
You can also just advance to the next slide while you're working on it. So
I can do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Allie, for that. I'm Nessa Richmond. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and I am so excited and happy to welcome Nezahualcoyotl to the Policy for the People series. The National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, or NSAC, advocates for federal reforms, and we are a member of this coalition. They're working to advance the sustainability of agriculture and food systems and natural resources and our rural communities. And they have a vision of agriculture which is really well aligned with the Rhode Island Food Policy Council's mission and vision of agriculture and food system where there's a safe, nutritious, ample, and affordable food produced by family farmers who are making a living, pursuing their trade, while they're protecting the environment and contributing to the strength and stability of their communities. So NSAC member groups like the Rhode Island Food Policy Council are working to advance common positions that support small and mid-sized farms and protect natural resources and ensure access to healthy food. And they do that by involving grassroots groups and bringing those grassroots perspectives. And that's all of you who are part of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, because we're members, also your grassroots perspectives are brought to the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. So Nessa, and I've never had the opportunity to introduce another person named Nessa, so thank you for that, is the Senior Grassroots Advocacy Coordinator at NSAC. He has 20 years of experience working in rural communities and with farm workers in Mexico and Central America and in the southern part of the US. He completed his Ph.D. in anthropology at Tulane University in New Orleans. And that training sparked his interest in the perspective of agricultural practices and the social implications of those agricultural practices, including thinking about how labor is structured and negotiated in societies, and how labor relations across cultural and geographic realms have an impact. So as part of the NSAC grassroots team, he works with the members on the coalition's local and regional food systems campaign and also in the climate campaign. So I'm just so excited to pass it over to you, and I think Ali will go ahead and cue up your slides next.
Oh, thank you, Nessa, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm excited to be here, and as Nessa said, this is a conversation, or maybe it was Ali who said it, but so yeah, we do have some slides to get through, but I would wait. I'm getting there. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to also hear your questions and what you want to share about the Farm Bill process. And yeah, I can go ahead and get started. I know a lot of this Ness already covered, but so I'll just briefly say that NSAC is a grassroots organization of more than 130 members, of which the Rhode Island Food Policy Council is a member. And as Nessa was saying, our members have a base of grassroots members who inform the member organizations, who then, as part of NSAC membership, come and share those priorities that can be turned into policy asks with the broader coalition. And then together as a coalition, we bring these priorities to members of Congress and the different federal agencies, mostly USDA, but occasionally we have to work with some of the other federal agencies. And we also have 6 issue committees, and then those 6 different issue committees also form different campaigns. And my work is more related to actually mobilizing and sharing some of that information at the campaign level. Next slide, please, Sally. Today, these are just aspirational goals, but I would like to just help build some knowledge on federal farm policy basics, including some of the baked-in racial injustice. I really appreciate RIFPC's statement at the beginning of this webinar. Just I think it just makes it easier for me to talk about some of these things, knowing that it's something that is already in everybody's mind. And yeah, then I like to just share a few skills on how to take action and contact your members of Congress, and then build our movement. Make sure that this doesn't end here. It's part of a larger strategy to get those priorities that we're all advocating for passed through Congress, and hopefully we can have a farm bill. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, probably not this year, but we have an opportunity to work with a new Congress and educate them. So that's going to be really our next steps. So, but with that, let's go to the next slide. All right, a little bit of farm bill history. And as we heard at the beginning, agriculture, and as you all know, agriculture in the U.S. is built on a legacy of stolen indigenous land and stolen African labor. Can we go to the next slide? Can't remember if I have. So we have just a horrible history of stolen land, broken treaties, and then the Homestead Act of 1862, which opened up a lot of indigenous land for settlement by European Americans or European immigrants who were just coming into the United States. Can we go to the next slide? I also want to acknowledge that we have benefited from the enslavement of African people. And something that, having grown up in the US South, something that I feel like we often forget is that a lot of those first colonies in the US South, they came from the Caribbean, and they brought in that plantation agricultural system. And with that system also came the enslavement of African people. And we continue to benefit from the labor of those African people, but also we continue to depend on imported labor from other parts of the world. And we continue to create this division between what is our farm labor and what the ideal farmer is, at least in the national imagination. And we continue to benefit from it through our reliance on immigrant workers. Next slide. Okay, but so the Farm Bill itself, its origins go back to the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933, which was enacted as a response to the Dust Bowl. And it addressed some of the same issues that we're still seeing today, but in a different way, like commodity prices, erosion and soil loss, capital access, supply chain management. But as you all know, BIPOC farmers were largely left out of the programs, and that distrust in the USDA and the Farm Bill process continues to feed a lot of the interactions and how different organizations, when they're approaching the Farm Bill process, how they view that process. And there is some completely understandable mistrust of what that process will look like, and an awareness to raise those issues more loudly because of those that history of discrimination and exclusion. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Our Farm Bill today influences what farmers grow, who can access land, capital, natural resources. As you probably know, it's reauthorized every 5 years. So the slide says every 5 to 7 years. It's supposed to be reauthorized every 5 years, but it doesn't actually happen every time. And this is one of those times that that process kind of has been delayed. So the last Farm Bill was passed in 2018. 2023 was the year that we expected it to have it reauthorized, but it still didn't happen. And here we are almost at the end of 2024, and we still have not seen a Farm Bill that both parties in both chambers can agree on. It is projected to invest $1.4 trillion over 10 years, and at least the 2018 Farm Bill reflects some deep-seated inequalities and presents an opportunity to drive changes that levels that playing field. Next slide. Structural racism. Yeah, I think, Nessa touched on this, but just, yeah, to emphasize again how we have benefited from that structural racism, and how it has benefited some folks more than others. But today, 98% of U.S. farmland is still owned by white people, while non-Hispanic white people make up 60% of the total population. There's still a continued land loss by farmers of color, and still, as I was mentioning, the disproportionate access to programs intended as farmer assistance. So a lot of people of color have had and continue to face challenges whenever they try to access some of those um, programs that the USDA has available. And again, just to mention again, our reliance on imported farm labor. 75% of farm workers are immigrants, and about half of them are undocumented. And we benefit on the fact that they're undocumented because that lack of immigration status makes them more vulnerable to abuses. So it's easier to exploit somebody who is afraid about raising their voice and organizing. Next slide. This slide is just so you get an idea of what the access to programs looks like at the national level. So this is just specifically for the conservation stewardship program and the acres in each state that are enrolled in that program by socially disadvantaged farmers. So, places like California have only 4%, and some of let me see, what's a good one? New York State has 9%. But yeah, just to highlight what that disparity looks like. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, what is the Farm Bill? As I said, it's a massive piece of federal legislation that is written once every 5 years and creates rules and sets funding levels for food and farm programs. Let's go to the next slide. A little bit of the structure. So we have 12 titles in the Farm Bill. And I don't feel like I need to read through each of those. But if there's anything that you have questions about, if you want to put them in the chat, we can chat about them in the end of the presentation. I will say that there is no labor in the Farm Bill except for Title 12, where it sometimes gets put under the miscellaneous. So miscellaneous is really where a lot of we don't really know what to do with this provisions of the Farm Bill live. But some of the other things like conservation has Title 2. Trade, NSAC doesn't really have any trade recommendations for the Farm Bill this cycle, although it has had in the past. And I can get a little more when we talk about some of our issue committees and campaigns. Next slide. Also, just so you get an idea of how that money is spent, 76% goes to nutrition programs. And that number might seem high, but it does cover a lot of programs, not just SNAP, but also federal assistance. And also with COVID, a lot of help for rural communities came from the different nutrition programs. Also, research is also considered part of research. Can be part nutrition, part conservation. It just lives in different parts of the Farm Bill. Next slide. Again, just a different way of looking at how the money is spent. The previous slide just gave you percentages. This one is giving you the actual dollar figures. And we can go on to the next slide too. Some examples of how the USC programs are distributed, depending on what your affiliation is. So like if you're a farmer, you can buy money to install a high tunnel or loan to buy farmland. And the high tunnels can actually be used as part of the EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program. There is also money for organizations, such as funding support for a new food hub or translation services. And then there's also programs that apply to individuals, like your SNAP card, or money for fruits and vegetables for elders through the either GovSNP or Senior Farmers Market program. Next slide. I am gonna, yeah, just go quickly through some of these, some of the issues that NSEC is working on. So climate and conservation, these are some of the programs that NSEC is specifically advocating for, like EQUIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, CSP, ASEP, Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and our CPP. And a lot of those funds are currently being funded through the IRA, the uh, Inflation Reduction Act, which unfortunately is in danger of not being renewed, which with the results of the last election. And I put in the link in there that I'm happy to share those links afterwards if people are interested in checking what we have on our website. Next slide, please. Farm safety net. Specifically, we're advocating for the farming opportunities training and outreach. It's a program for beginning farmers and ranchers. Sorry, no, that program is under the photo section, and then section 2501, which specifically helps farmers of color get funds to start a farm. Also, I invite you to look at our farm safety net report in the link bit.ly /FSN report, or you can just go to the NSEC website and look for it in our publications. Next slide. We also do some work on research, local food, the SERP program, Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education. There are also other programs to help people who want to transition into organic work. And then we also, as part of that work, engage with some of the extension offices in the land-grant universities who are doing some of that research work, but also engaging with some of the farmers on the ground. No pun intended. Next slide. Local food systems. There are a couple of different issue committees that are related to the local food systems campaign. The MFS marketing and food systems and rural development, and the food systems integrity. But yeah, basically the focus of those committees and that campaign is to strengthen our local food economies and making sure that we're building that infrastructure to help local economies is there and take some of that concentration in our food production from some of the largest food producers, but also meat producers. So our work also includes strengthening local food processing and helping some of those smaller meat producers get some of the contracts that they would need to help them get a foot in the door to actually contract with the federal government, but the premise is that it does help our local economies to have some of those smaller producers so that we're not depending on the larger processors, so that some of the meat that we produce doesn't, a lot of that meat gets sent to different states as it gets grown, processed, cut, and then distributed. That leaves a lot of empty pockets of land with little infrastructure throughout our country. And I'm happy to talk more about that. That's because that's one of the issues that I work on. I can say a little more, but I'm gonna move us along and happy to add more on that if people have more questions on that. Next slide. Yeah, food safety is also one of the issues that fall under the food systems integrity. Next slide. All right, and yeah, just an open invitation to look more at our programs on our website. sorry, not our programs, but the different programs that the Farm Bill funds and that the federal government has available. But you're more than welcome to look there. And again, happy to share resources afterwards. Next slide. All right, a little bit about the Farm Bill process. I had actually taken this slide out, and then as we're entering a new cycle for the Farm Bill, we're expecting to see some new marker bills, but these are basically bills that are introduced in Congress, and they're not intended to pass on their own, but their hope is that they can be incorporated into the Farm Bill as it gets introduced. So there were maybe about 12, I think it was the last number I saw of marker bills that NSAC was supporting last cycle, but as we're expecting to see the Farm Bill enter into a new cycle, then we're expecting to introduce some of those bills or maybe work on new bills that have a better chance of passing. But without compromising our priorities, just to clarify. Next slide. Yeah, so there are two agriculture committees. There's the one in the House and one in the Senate. Each one is responsible for creating and editing the first draft of the Farm Bill, and each one is led by the chair of the committee. So as of today, Debbie Stabenow from Michigan is the Senate Agriculture Committee chair, and G.T. Thompson from Georgia is the House Agriculture Committee chair, and they're from Debbie Stabenow is a Democrat, and so the party in control of that chamber sets the chairperson for that committee, and of course they set the agenda, and it's their purview and responsibility to introduce the bill that they hope will pass. So we actually had Debbie Stabenow release her legislative text yesterday. We're still trying to figure out what the intent was. I know that she had a press conference yesterday to announce what her intentions was, but I was not able to attend. So I'm gonna have to check with my colleagues on that and share later. My sense is that it was probably more about a political maneuver than actually hopes of getting a Farm Bill passed in a lame duck session. Next slide. So this is a map of the different states where a member of Senate sits on the Agriculture Committee. We expect, so this was, I couldn't find a more updated version, but for example, we lost Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and Debbie Stabenow in Michigan is retiring. So we expect that now that the Republicans are going to control the Senate, we expect that they will have somebody from their own party who already sits in the committee to move up to the chairmanship, and more than likely it's John Bozeman from Arkansas, who was the ranking member of the committee, but it's still something that we will keep an eye on, because somebody from that committee, even Bozeman, could be appointed to a different position as they move through the chamber leadership. Next slide. And yeah, this is just so you have again, it's outdated because I couldn't find something that had yet updated. That the new appointments will still have to be or sorry, not appointments, but committee assignments will have to be made with the incoming Congress. But just so you get an idea of what the committee assignment map looks like for the Agriculture Committee. Currently, we have G.T. Thompson from Georgia as the chair, and David Scott, also from Georgia, as the ranking member. Next slide. All right. So what does the process look like? So as I was mentioning, each committee will have their own version. It will go through a markup. After that, uh, where um where the different amendments and the bill itself gets voted on by the different members of the committee, and then each committee in each of the chambers will do that. Then they will move their versions of the bill to a full House vote. After those versions get passed, and only after they both get passed, then the leaders from the House and the Senate will, including the committee chairs, will form a conference committee to combine the bills. Then after they have done that, they will then take them back to their chambers to get voted on by the full floor, and only then, after all that has after all that voting has passed, then they can send it to the president for either approval or veto. But no, hopefully we can get an approval. Next slide. Yes, I was mentioning the farm bill. The current farm bill expired September 30th of last year, and we had a 1-year extension, which was allowed to expire in September of this year. So doesn't mean that all the programs get defunded, but there are some orphan programs that get uh, that lose their funding. There are some things that Congress can agree on, and well, the SNAP benefits is one of those funding for farmers to fight climate change. The IRA continues to be something a sticky point that the Republican Party wants to defund or remove the climate guardrails. And also the guaranteed payment for the largest farms, something that ENSA continues to, and its members continue to advocate for, is that um, uh, we need to make some of those funds available to the smaller farms too, not just the largest ones. Next slide. All right. How you can take action? Well, yeah, contact your members of Congress. That link right there, govtrack.us, will take you to a page where you can look up your member of Congress based on your address and zip code. Next slide. It's important to also establish a relationship with them to also know where they stand. But so yeah, you can sign up for their newsletter and follow them on Facebook and Twitter. See what bills they have sponsored. Their voter record, committee list. Next slide. And then you can also stay up to date with what's happening with the farm policy. So I know the Rhode Island Food Policy Council has its own resources, but I also invite you to check out NSACS for some of the stuff that we uh, that we have published and also share with our members. If you do not currently subscribe to our weekly roundup, I encourage you to do so. Before I even started working at NSAC, that was one of my go-tos to stay up to date on some of the, well, I say stay up to date, just like get a taste of what the policy world was doing. And yes, so there are some other food and agricultural policy publications out there, like Friends Politicos, Morning Ag, and Civil Eats. Oh, thank you, Nessa. And next slide. And of course, I think this is the most important part: build a relationship with your member of Congress. You can schedule meetings with them or their ag staff. More than likely, you're not going to be able to meet with them personally, but um, their staffers are the ones that they will listen to. So you can bring your priorities, what you want to share with them, to them. You can email their offices, and you can also invite them and their staff to your events. So if you're having a panel discussion, if you're doing a farm tour, if you have a farmer's market, any of those things, you can invite them to attend town halls. And yeah, just, be persistent. Just make sure that you call them. Next slide. When you do meet them, make sure to, I think, some of these are basic, right? You know to shake hands and invitations, but also if there are some important news for you, you know, especially if you received a grant as a constituent, they will be interested in knowing that you, your organization, received a grant or an award, and it's something that they too can highlight um, when they're advocating for this and vote and show us a sign of why this program is working when they vote for it. And yeah, you can attend their town halls and all those things. Next steps, yeah, call your member of Congress and share your priorities for the Farm Bill and that it should strengthen our food system. Make sure to introduce yourself and organization and your organization to your members of Congress, especially if they serve in the Agriculture Committee. I am not sure if any of Rhode Island's, they're not on that committee. And yeah, sign up to receive our newsletter. Next slide. All right, I'm gonna pass it on to Max.
Thanks, Neza. Yeah, what great information you just shared. And I'm sure that folks will have tons of questions. So make sure to start populating the chat if you haven't already. But we wanted to take a moment as a group to also highlight what RIFPC's Farm Bill priorities are. This was developed by a group of interested council members. So for folks who are new on the call, we tend to focus at the state level and on state level policy. But there's been a small group of council members who have been really interested and recognize that the Farm Bill is so critical to the work that we're doing here in our state and its impacts on our local food system. And so a small group of council members have gotten together and they developed these Farm Bill priorities last year, I believe, when we thought there was going to be a Farm Bill then, and it's been pushing along. So they developed these based off of NSAC's work and our experience here in Rhode Island around what a good food system would look like. And so our priorities are preserve and protect agricultural land, ensure access to affordable, culturally relevant food for all people, promote climate smart, environmentally sustainable agricultural practices, support a vibrant and just local food economy, and increase land access for urban and BIPOC farmers. And for folks who are interested in diving a little bit more into what each of these priorities look like, I'm going to drop a link in the chat that has more details on each of these priorities for folks who are interested to learn more. Thanks. And I will pass it back to Neza.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Yeah, just to open it up for questions or clarification, anything that you think I may have gone too fast over, I'm happy to revisit.
I know folks have a lot of questions, and feel free to put them in the chat or just raise your hand or speak up. And I will call on David to ask a couple questions. I know you probably have a couple ready just to get us started. If you don't mind, I'm sure you have some in your head.
I see Isaac.
Or why don't we let Vernon go first?
Okay, great. Thank you, Vernon. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Hello. I've noticed the effort to like really support like rural farmers, whether that be with mental health or with not direct payments, but with like monetary value in some form. How have like urban farmers, like from urban areas and cities, been a focus for you, if at all?
We do have a urban agriculture working group headed by our policy specialist Hannah Quigley. And I believe it's open to NSAC members to join. So if you want to connect with that group and talk about some of the issues that are part of that work, I'm happy to connect you to.
Thank you.
But yes, it is an issue that we're working on.
And Nessa, if there are any online materials that Vernon could look at, maybe you or I think you have another staff person on the call, could put a link in the chat so he could learn a little bit more about that. I think that would be super helpful. I just have a basic question I'll throw in there, which is, yes, you're right that, the Rhode Island congressional delegation does not, I don't know if we've ever had someone on either of the agriculture committees. How do the people get selected who are on those committees?
I think they usually come from big agricultural states. So, but I think they also have to express their interest, because, for example, Cory Booker is, from New Jersey. And I know that there are farms in New Jersey, but it's not a big state that you consider to be an agricultural uh, stronghold. So I think it just comes from their own personal relationships with the different members with the party leadership when they ask for that assignment.
Okay. And I'll read a question out that Isaac put into the chat. Will NSAC be considering changing conservation and climate change advocacy messaging in favor of something more like soil health or healthy food, and other languages that accomplishes the same priorities but is more friendly to the current majority?
All I can say is that we're having those internal conversations about how we will change our messaging, or if at all, and we'll also be checking with members to make sure that the messaging that we put out there aligns with the coalition as a whole. One thing we don't want to do is compromise our values, but also we want to make sure that what we are talking about, what we're recommending, is not immediately tossed aside because the message seems like you don't want to lose your audience in the first sentence.
Got it. And Jocelyn has asked, how many times can the Farm Bill be extended?
My understanding is that it can be extended as many times as it is necessary, but it does have to be, they do have to pass a continuing resolution for it to continue to be funded.
I just have a follow-up on that, which is that when it's extended and comes time for the grant programs to be funded, does that mean that they are funded at baseline, or are there still conversations about additional funding for those programs on top of baselines?
No, they're just funded at baseline. They don't get additional funding. So then that's the purpose of of renewing the Farm Bill with. So I heard somebody refer to it as being updated rather than just extended.
Got it. There aren't any more questions in the chat. Does anyone have a question or want to come off mute? I know, Allison, you have all of your students there. They're welcome to ask questions as well.
Well, I think I can go, Nessa, if you'd like me to continue the conversation, because I've been reading probably way more than is healthy for me for the last 2 weeks. And I think no one's got any really solid answers by any means, but I'm kind of at this point of like, we don't. There's so many random variables here. We're seeing the whole RFK thing is mind-boggling. That's putting it politely. And he may want to be involved in this. We're seeing thoughts of blowing up the entire bill and starting it from scratch. I've seen that several times now. Um, Removing SNAP completely. I've seen that possibility floated multiple times, but from some members of Congress. I mean, how do we face like absolutely complete chaos and uncertainty in this case? And not just in regards to the Farm Bill, it's really in regards to the entire Congress. But since we're having this conversation here, in this, any thoughts? Anything from? I'm sure everyone at NSAC is reading way too much material for the last 2 weeks, just as I am. And I'm just curious what their takeaway is.
Our takeaway is broadly that there will be things that we can still work on, and we just there will be a range of different situations, reactions from the incoming administration and the incoming Congress. But we will have to just keep an eye on the things, the opportunities that arise that are actually useful. And this might also be a moment for mobilization. People, especially in the early stages of the new Congress and administration, there may be times when people say like, this is bananas, and then not necessarily just NSAC members, but people across the movement will push back, and so that can actually serve as a kind of one, building a grassroots movement, but also creating sort of a line of defense against some of the more outrageous parts of those proposals. Had something else to add to that. Oh yeah, I just wanted to just remind everyone that the last farm bill passed in the last Trump administration, so it's not perfect by any means, but I think that there's hope to actually get something done.
That's a
Thank
good reminder. That's a good reminder. And David,
Yep.
Harry in the chat has asked if you.
Yeah, I mean, Harry, I wish I, kept track of all the links and things I've read over the last couple of weeks. I mean, a lot of it is, the usual Politico and, stories in the news. I love Helena Botmiller's, I'm blanking on her, Evich, I think. I'm blanking on her name, her full name. I'm sorry, but she has a Food Fix newsletter, which is fantastic. Obviously, Heather Cox Richardson, I read her every day. She also did a podcast with Jon Stewart last week, which was really fascinating. Actually, a really fascinating conversation. And I don't remember the woman's name. She also did the podcast with Jon Stewart, and I think it does apply here. Is a woman from, I want to say Kansas, might have been Nebraska. It was from a large family farm in the Midwest, and she posited, and it seems to make really good sense in this great big landscape that we're in right now. Um, Even though I don't think anyone has an answer, while she fully acknowledged the white privilege of her family having this land that they own in the Midwest, uh, she said the people around her family, while she's completely vehemently opposed to their politics, um, it's a yes, there's that. No one's going to deny there's a race issue. I'm not saying that. She wasn't saying that, but she was saying there's also a class issue that somehow the Republicans have played into better than anyone else, and that's something that the Democrats missed. In that, yes, we all acknowledge, taking of indigenous lands and slavery and all of that, and then we, get to a certain point and forget that there are, unfortunately, privileged white people that still don't have what they think they're supposed to have to live, just basics like food and being able to pay the bills and things of that nature. And it was a fascinating conversation. I think you could, put that class across everything, of course, but it was interesting to discuss, and I don't ever see that really addressed. Now that she said that, now that I've been looking for examples of it.
Is it Sarah's Marsh?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to that podcast over the weekend.
It was great. It was a great conversation. I really recommend everyone listen to. I think John is a little. He tries to, be funny sometimes when he doesn't need to be, and but he does have really great guests on his podcast. That really have great conversations.
Good to know.
Type in the name.
Thank you, David. Do others have questions that they want to ask? Thank you for putting the name in.
Harry put another question in the chat. Is there anywhere that the good food movement aligns with anything that the incoming administration has proposed?
I mean, in theory, RFK wants to wipe out all processed food. However, then he gets on a plane and eats McDonald's, which I personally have not touched in 40 years. So the level of hypocrisy will continue to flow. But in theory, who the hell knows?
But that's a good point. Yeah, I was trying to think, but yeah, that is actually something that um, is in line with a lot of the food movements. asks, less processed foods. Yeah.
Have you heard anything about appointments yet for USDA? I know it's usually one of the later ones to be suggested, but have you heard anyone and anyone's names being proposed yet?
Yeah. So last week we heard the name G.T. Thompson, who is the current chair of the House Agriculture Committee, which it's not great, but it wouldn't be terrible. At least this person understands what the Farm Bill is supposed to do. But then more recently, we heard this week Sid Miller, who's the current Texas Agriculture Commissioner. Those are the two I remember. I'm gonna call on not to put you on the not to put you on the spot, Steph, but do you remember anyone else? And it's okay if you don't. I'm blanking right now.
Unfortunately, I don't. And I'm also in transit. Sorry if there's background
Oh,
noise.
sorry, Steph. Thanks.
If it's okay, I have a question. What would need to happen for, because right now we've been talking about like extending it or updating the bill, but like if they want to get rid of the bill completely, what would need to happen, and what can what would a group like this need to do to ensure that if that were to happen, what could we do to prevent that?
What I envision is that we would just try to mobilize all of NSAC's members to write to the members of Congress and highlight how important the Farm Bill is. Now, I don't think that it's likely to be just completely done away with. I think that a lot of people in every state one of the reasons that the nutrition programs are so big is that they were implemented so that people would actually but by people I mean members of Congress would support the Farm Bill. So I think that there's generally broad support for the Farm Bill. I think most everybody understands how important it is. Everybody in Congress anyways understands how important it is, and I think the idea that it would just not be renewed or just let expire and do nothing else with it, I think it would just create a big vacuum, and I don't think that it's something that any of them seriously want to do. But if they do, just be ready to mobilize.
And as David mentioned, we have already been starting to hear proposals about, cuts to SNAP and changes to the SNAP program. Have you heard at this point any specific changes to other types of programs that, especially those that have an impact here in Rhode Island, whether they're the environmental programs or the LAMP programs that support a lot of the food hub type work and local food promotion work?
I have not heard of any specific cuts to any of those programs, but I can check with my colleagues and get back to you if there's any rumblings out there.
Okay, and I just want to make sure if there aren't any other questions. If there are other questions, I want to make sure we make time for them. If not, I can just explain to folks who are on the call a little bit how the Rhode Island Food Policy Council interacts with NSAC, so that you all have a good understanding of how you can interact as members of the council. So any other last call for questions? Okay. Thanks for putting those links in, David. So I guess what I want to say is, you heard Nessa mention that there are lots of working groups of NSAC. Just like we have work groups, they also have work groups at a national level. And so there's, we don't have enough capacity. We primarily focus on the state policy work, as I think all of you know, we don't have capacity to be on all of those work groups. But we do make sure that we are always have somebody who's going to the Grassroots monthly meeting, which happens, very regularly, and it's where the staff gets an update on what's going on. And when there are interested members who want to know what's going on, then I can share that information with them. We don't, the information I think that NSAC puts out often says, don't distribute, like don't put this up on Facebook. But as members of the council, we can, share that with you in a way that it doesn't, go any further. So if you have an interest in that, then please reach out. The Farm Bill Work Group isn't, it's not like really actively operating right now. We're kind of waiting to see what happens and where we're needed. But we do always have the opportunity to get more engaged when the time comes, and that means you have an opportunity to get engaged as well. So if you have an interest in being more connected through the council's membership in NSAC, just reach out to Allie or me or Max, and we can let you know when things start moving again in terms of opportunities for a council work group to feed into the Farm Bill and other topics, because I think it's important to note that NSAC doesn't just work on the Farm Bill. That's a big thing, but it generally only happens every 5 years. And maybe we can close out today, Nessa, with just you sharing a little bit about the other important bills, like appropriations that you guys see coming down the pike, so folks on the call have an understanding of that. It's not just about Farm Bill all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for that reminder. So a lot of the programs that are in the Farm Bill actually have to be funded, and so that funding takes place through the federal appropriations process. So there's an appropriations bill that funds most of the federal spending, but so the appropriations committee will have a agriculture subcommittee, and they are the ones who vote on and mark up a bill that will decide what our funding levels will be for any and all of the USDA programs that are in the Farm Bill. So we currently have the 2024 2024 appropriations. No, I lost my years. I can't remember if 2024 is the one that is already being funded, or we're still waiting for it to be passed. We think we're still waiting for fiscal year 2024 to be funded, which seems like consistently we've been a year behind. I think that we only passed the federal appropriations for fiscal year 2023 in the first half of 2024. And then we're waiting for the current fiscal years to be passed, which would set the stage for what we expect to see in 2025, 2026.
Okay, that was really helpful. And I think that we're reaching the end of our time. So glad that you all were able to join us today. I don't know, Allie, if there was something you wanted to say about the next policy for the people or something along those lines before we say goodbye.
Thank you. And thank you, Nessa. This was so informative and exciting. And we will share the slides out with everyone. I dropped in the chat the registration for our next Policy for the People session, which is happening December 10th. If you had that date saved before, check your calendar, because now it's December 10th. We had updated it. We moved it a week earlier. Hope you can still join us, and please bring a friend. I think the more the merrier. This time we're going to talk about the Rhode Island Food Policy Council's Good Food Policy Agenda for 2025. And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks, Nessa, for being with us.